why Sheffield Wednesday's win on Saturday was the most impressive result of the EFL weekend, but are Sheffield United the most impressive team in the Championship? League One was the headline league over the weekend. Some massive results. Streaking Stags, for example. But did Charlton lay down a blueprint to get Blues beat? League Two, Doncaster and Vale and Crewe zipped their way to big wins to 0. And Aki won the battle of the winless towards the bottle. I'm Ali Maxwell. Towards the bottle.
Towards the bottle.
In and around the bottle.
Is that an indication of your weekend?
The bottle of League Two. Starting in the Championship, Coventry 1, Sheffield Wednesday 2. For me, the most impressive result on paper of the weekend. And that's because across 35 EFL games, with one still to come tonight in League Two, only 4 away teams picked up all 3 points.
Weird.
There were more 0-0s, George, 7, than there were away wins, 4.
That is statistically really unlikely.
Quirky. Anomalous.
If you can, like, putting numbers on it, I'd say a 0-0 draw is normally, in betting terms, probably like a 10-1 shot, so like less than a 10% chance of happening. Whereas an away win obviously will vary, but it's rare that you get anything like that from one away win, and plenty of them will be odds on over the weekend. So that is a quirk.
That's why each week is a beautiful, unique snowflake of a week in the EFL. The other away wins, Bristol Rovers, Port Vale, Doncaster, all have merits of their own. But those 3 teams had all had 2 home games in the week leading up to it. We have come off the back of a 3-game week in the EFL. Saturday, midweek, Saturday. Whereas Wednesday, the only of those away teams who were also on the road in midweek, they played on Wednesday night in Bristol and on Saturday in Coventry. Their hosts, Coventry, had an extra day's rest and they'd played at home in midweek as well. So given the lack of away wins, given the amount of 0-0 draws, I think we can say, if we're looking for a reason, as if there needs to be one, I think it's fair to say that the players were feeling it a little bit this weekend after the first sort of triple header, if you like, of the season. And I think it had an impact of things. So for Wednesday to win was incredibly impressive, both in terms of their quality of play and the game plan of Danny Röhl and the way that it was executed, but also character, determination, legs. And that's just as much a mental thing as it is a physical thing in this game. They had to dig deep here because Coventry had the majority of the ball and Wednesday were fine with that. They are much less aggressive out of possession as they were to start the season, as Röhl looks to pick up some results, which they have done recently with 2 wins and a draw in their last 3. But they still had to go through it here. Rodoni had put Coventry ahead. After a really strong, he sort of plucked it out the air onto his chest, drove forward with the ball and shot from outside the box into the corner. Really nice goal from Jack Rodoni. And Coventry, having won in midweek, was the confidence flooding back? Would they ease to victory? No, they would not. A really quick transition goal at the end of the first half, smashed in by Gassama. And then at the heart of their winner was Anthony Musaba. It was scored by Shea Charles, but it was Musaba who drove the ball forward and slipped it into Charles. I think really impressive for Shea Charles, who's playing a midfield role alongside Barry Bannon, where Bannon is the star, where Bannon gets the headlines. But in order for Bannon to do that, his partner needs to put in a lot of work. And the young Shea Charles has a lot to do in that position. And he's still, despite having been, up against it, out of possession, holding his shape, blocking passing lanes, intercepting passes, winning his duels all game, he still had the energy to get up the pitch and support that counter-attack and win it. So, George, I come into the studio today wanting to talk about Wednesday for all the reasons that I've laid out. I think that was the most impressive result of the weekend in an EFL with so few away wins. It means 7 points in 3 games, 2 of them away from home, and the other, the win against West Brom last weekend. So fantastic return for Wednesday. But what of their hosts? To repurpose a popular phrase on Twitter, which is, every day on Twitter, there is one main character, and the goal is not to be it. I sort of think in the Championship, there's almost always one club that's either in or seems to be teetering towards crisis. My question to you is, are Coventry it at the moment in the Champ?
Yeah, right now, I think off the back of a home game where you've gone 1-0 up and then you concede in the 93rd minute to lose 2-1, off the back of a run of form that we have to remember, the Coventry's struggles don't just date back to the beginning of this season. They date back to the back end of last season, where they were a side we were at Wembley seeing them valiantly go down to Manchester United in the FA Cup semi-final, and it would have seemed impossible to us then if you would tell us that at the beginning of October there would be a section of the Coventry City fan base calling for Mark Robins to go, and such a long period of poor results. And that is what we're going to look at for this week's FotMob Corner early on in the show. So make sure you know, if you're listening to this, get FotMob out and you can follow what we're saying. On YouTube, you can see the graphics as we go as well. But the question here is, what is going on at Coventry? Why are the performances poor? Why are they not continuing to progress as we saw them do so under Mark Robins for so many seasons? And if you look at the Coventry City forum right now, there is a poll asking, should Mark Robins be sacked? 230 votes, of which the majority, 62%, say they think he should stay. And then the other section saying either go or they're undecided, which shows that, you know, I think the support is still there. But the question is being asked, and there's a fair amount of support for the idea that Robins should leave, despite him being the architect so far of what they've done up to this point. So if you look at their campaign, you look at the underlying numbers first, because the results clearly haven't been great. And in terms of expected goals, according to FotMob, they currently rank 10th in the league, which is okay, especially if you have a good defensive unit, which they have. They're 18th for XG conceded, with just 9.1 over the course of the season so far. And I would say that those numbers would normally marry up to being...
Is that 18th? Sorry, just to be clear, 18th where 24th is the best.
Correct.
And first is the worst.
Exactly.
Okay. So a top 8 defence per the XGs.
Top 6 defence. 18th.
7. Yeah. I hedged my bets.
And so I would normally say a top 7 defensive unit coupled with a top 10 attacking unit would normally lead to above average results. So, you know, obviously there's more to football than just expected goals, but that indicates to me that there is reason to think that without much changing, they will improve and probably be okay. And why, you know, getting rid of Robins now, after so much evidence of him being someone who is very much capable at the level and very much capable at Coventry, would be rash and maybe not the way to play things. If you look at big chances missed, they're currently ranked 7th with 15. You know, when you see that Norwich and Leeds are 1st and 2nd, that suggests that, you know, it's still possible to miss a lot of good chances and be a good side. But that again points to some issues with their attacking prowess. And they rank 5th for shots on target this season at 4.6 per game. So again, you wouldn't think much has to change in order for their attacking output to improve. So in terms of some very base level underlying numbers as per FotMob, things probably aren't quite as bad as the results suggest. But then we can look at kind of, I guess, the more intricate details of what's going on at Coventry this season. And here we can see the team that they put out on Saturday in a 4-2-3-1 up against Sheffield Wednesday. And there are positives here. Ben Sheaf's return to the side is incredibly important. He missed the start of the season through injury. I think as he gets back to full speed and full fitness, he's someone who, if I were to draw up a list of 15 Championship players who will definitely play in the Premier League, Ben Sheaf would absolutely be one of those. And that is, his return is important. Eccles has been brilliant this season, and Radoni's come in and done incredibly well, including that goal, as he said on Saturday. I think you know, they're kind of, at the moment, having played a back three for a lot of the time under Robins, are now playing a 4, and they're trying to play out from the back, which hasn't necessarily worked. In terms of attacking output from fullback, Van Elek is obviously very proficient going forward and a good attacking fullback. However, the thing I want to look at here is their attacking output from wide areas, where Efren Mason-Clark, brought in from Peterborough, signed in January, was loaned back out again, comes in this summer. Now, he is someone who is currently playing when he plays on the right-hand side of the front three, because Haji Wright dominates that left-hand side. Because we've seen over now, you know, a season and a half, that when Haji Wright is on it, when he's playing well, when he's up for it, he can be one of the most destructive attacking players in the league. We haven't seen it very much this season. We saw it once against my team, against Oxford, where he was by far and away the best player on the pitch and dominated that game, and was a pretty important reason as to why they won that game. However, Coventry fans are getting frustrated that despite the fact they know his talents, and that is his on-ball talent and his physical ability to dominate the fullback, he's not doing it often enough. But in Mason Clark, if you look back to his time at Peterborough, this is his shot map. So if you go on the FotMob app and you look at the shot map, you will see that a lot of his goals were scored basically in between, if you're the keeper, the right-hand post and the edge of the penalty box. And a lot of his shots came from there too. And that is because he is a right-footed player whose key attacking skill was drifting inside off the left-hand side, finding areas to shoot from inside the box in that left-hand channel. And now, because he's playing on the right-hand side, he's having very few opportunities to do that. His total XG this season is 1.58. He's yet to score. That will come. Like we know from him that he is a player who is eminently good enough to improve that output. However, he's not given the opportunity to play in his correct position. And given that Haji Wright isn't performing particularly well, I would like to see him given that opportunity, especially because maybe, if Mason Clark comes in and plays off the left-hand side, then Wright will not feel as comfortable within his in this position, and maybe that will improve his output too. So I think the overarching thing here, and also Ellis Sims as a player and Brandon Thomas-Sante are both players who are struggling to find their shooting boots, despite the fact that we know that they're qualities too. So my take on things is that things will probably improve without them doing anything, realistically. Like
last season, they also started really poorly, and I remember the same questions about Wright and Sims, both as individuals and together. Like, are these guys good enough to provide the level of goal output to replace Gyökeres, for example? That was the big question at the time. And at this point of the season, the answer was getting towards a definitive no. And then when Coventry went on a roaring run for so many months, both of those players were hot as hell. So, like, what I find difficult with players at this level is, like, to what extent should we expect a player to be hot for extended periods of a 10-month season? I think of Josh Sargent, who I'm confident in saying is the best all-round number 9 in the league. I think he's playing brilliantly this season, but he's missing so many chances and penalties and like one-on-ones and tap-ins that he should score. He's missed the most big chances in the league. So I find this really hard, where it's like, I understand the frustration of watching Wright and Sims underperform in front of goal, and that has a massive impact on the results of the team.
Sure.
Even if the process, as per what you said at the start, doesn't seem horrendous, it's made to look poor by the lack of confidence or execution at the top of the pitch. But those same players, we know, can also contribute to an unbelievable team that's scoring loads of goals.
And that's exactly, I think, the key point with Coventry now is you have to look at the process rather than just the results. And obviously, when results aren't good and you're losing games, regardless of the performances, people will look for answers as to why. And that's going to mean blaming players or blaming managers or blaming other things. When even, with Robbins himself, when you've got a guy who has achieved so much at Coventry, it seems bizarre to me that as soon as things turn, you're like, well, he's the problem. Like, he's the issue. The one process that has changed a little bit in recent times is, and this is a bit of a bone of contention for Coventry fans, is their approach to the transfer market, and in particular the loan market, where they've made a decision, and I can 100% see why you would make this decision in terms of a player trading viewpoint, but not to loan players this season. So all of their players belong to them. The idea is that you have your own assets and you build up their value, and then becomes rather than building up the value of someone else's asset, they belong to you, and you're able to then monetize that. But when you look back at the best players that Coventry have had in recent years, Victor Gyökeres, who is now an elite level European striker who they sold for a lot of money, he was on loan initially before making the loan permanent from Brighton. Looking at Callum O'Hare, who I know they weren't able to monetize the way they wanted to because of the contract situation, but he was initially a loan from Villa that they made permanent. Ben Sheaf, who I just said is one of the best players in the whole of the Championship, was initially a loan that was made permanent. And then you look back to the playoff final, where Luke McNally played as a centre-back who was on loan at the time from Burnley and was such an important player to that team. Callum Doyle, another one recently, who came in on loan from Manchester City and had a big impact. So the one process that seems to have maybe changed is the approach to loans, and not looking to get players that maybe in terms of pure quality wouldn't be accessible to Coventry City. And maybe if they did have 2 or 3 elite level Premier League loans, then things would be different this time around. So that is, on a recruitment point of view, something that I think might be worth addressing. But from a neutral's perspective, and I'm not telling Coventry fans who go to games how they should feel about it, but my take is, in terms of the numbers themselves, players who are underperforming will turn it around fairly soon. And certainly, even if things don't really change from a chance creation point of view, I think Coventry City will improve. Yeah,
really interesting. I think the only thing that I would add that I see as another talking point within Coventry right now is in goal. You focused at the top end of the pitch. I think at this early stage of the season, the sorts of things that can have an impact on results versus underlying performance are still as basic as, are your strikers finishing their chances? is your goalkeeper or goalkeepers saving the shots that they're facing? And at the top end of the pitch, they've been underperforming. In goal, they've been underperforming as well. Now, they signed Oliver Dovin, Swedish goalkeeper, in the summer. He started 6 games. His save percentage of 63.67 is pretty low. If you account for the quality of the shots that he faced, he's still underperforming how you'd expect your average goalkeeper in terms of his shot stopping. And so Mark Robins made a change. He thought that was undermining their performances and not allowing them to put their best foot forward. So he brings in Ben Wilson. Now, Wilson's been there for a few seasons. He's had a period where he was the number one, but for the most part, he's been a backup goalkeeper. I think it's fair to say sort of Coventry fan approval rating of Wilson as a shot stopper isn't that high either. And I think by bringing him in, you're taking quite a big risk. You are risking both the confidence and the ability of your new goalkeeper from overseas to establish themselves and build confidence in the Coventry shirt. You're also putting quite a lot of pressure on the bloke that you bring in, and it's fair to say Wilson hasn't really stepped up in the last couple of games. And look, Gassama's shot for Wednesday that equalised for them was a very, very powerful one, and you still felt like maybe the goalkeeper should be stopping that as the ball very much came in and around his vicinity. And so again, when you change the goalkeeper and then the next keeper doesn't make much of an impact either, then I wonder if you're in a bit of a tailspin when it comes to that area of the pitch. So hopefully, mainly for outsiders as much as Cov fans, it's been an interesting breakdown of, why Coventry are, not for the first time in the last couple of years, starting the season poorly, despite people like us giving them kind of big ups pre-season and expecting quite a lot pre-season. If you look at a league table after 9 games and after 46 games, there will always be teams towards the top who end up near the bottom, and normally some vice versa as well. So personally, and it feels like you're in agreement, I still, as difficult as it is, particularly with 2 weeks off now before the next game, just head down, keep believing. I think you still have to, and I still think that is the right way to look at it. But then again, it's a lot easier for us to say without the kind of emotional ties to it. George, from what I thought was the most impressive result, that's Wednesday winning at Coventry, to perhaps the most impressive performance, Norwich 4, Hull 0. It means it's 10 points in the 5 games between international breaks. Really impressive return after a couple of wobbly performances and results to start the season. And most importantly, this is really fun.
Really fun, yeah. I mean, Hull had been a confusing one to start the season because we were promised, again, heart attack football from Tim Volter. We didn't see it. And then suddenly we did. And we saw them win 3 games in a row in the Championship, beating Stoke 3-1, beating Cardiff 4-1, and beating QPR 3-1. And you're like, okay, maybe it's just going to take time. And so they go to Norwich pretty hot in terms of what they're doing on the pitch and believing that they are turning a corner. And Norwich just completely outclassed them. All the defensive worries around this heart attack football. I mean, it was heart attack football in a literal sense. And if you're a Hull fan, where
we've got to talk about this quickly. I feel really bad about the heart attack football thing because it is being brought up not just by us, basically everywhere I see Hull and Tim Walter discussed. The quote was made by a journalist that was apparently put to Tim Walter, and it did say in the article in the Eye that we talked about pre-season about Tim Walter that he endorsed the expression.
Well, there you go.
But I'm not sure I still think it's a bit harsh that we keep bringing it up, particularly so early on.
Tim Walter needs to come out and do a likes doesn't equal retweets.
Yeah, retweets does not equal endorsement. Yeah, I do feel a bit bad about that because he didn't promise heart attack football. He didn't in his first press conference go, you guys are going to be going nuts over this stuff. Like that isn't really what happened.
But yeah, I mean, I guess even if you take out that quote, what we saw from his previous managerial perspectives and what he promised in terms of the way he wanted to play, I mean, get rid of heart attack football. It was attacking. For sure. It was, and
it's what the owner in sacking Liam Senior and publicly discussing style of play. It's what he said either explicitly or implicitly by hiring Tim Walter.
Yes. And what was evident here is even before Marcelino Núñez scored after 16 minutes with just a really cool way of kicking a football, which I liked, where it was like a dugout. It was like a dugout screamer. I'm not entirely sure how he managed to get that kind of purchase on it, but it was a brilliant strike. But even before then, Hull's ridiculously high line was exposed twice to a pretty devastating degree. Like the first an amazing bit of link play from Sargent set Borja Sainz away, and Sainz tried the little scoop, but he sent it just wide of the post. They had another opportunity not long after that, and it felt like a matter of time until they went ahead. And it wasn't a surprise when Nunez and Sargent scored back to back very quickly to make it 2-0. Sargent was such a relentless threat throughout the game, not just in terms of his goal scoring, albeit he did miss a couple of other chances, but also as a creative force too. So impressed by him. The third goal that came through, Gordon, was thanks to just a massive mix-up at the back from Hull.
Tough scene for Charlie Hughes.
Really
I think
poor.
it was his first
Charlie
appearance.
Hughes came off the bench and basically tried to like pirouette out of trouble in his own box and went straight into the path of, I think, Sargent. The ball ricocheted across to Gordon, who stuck it home. And then Sainz got the goal that he really deserved with a expert lob. Just such a clever finish from a guy who's obviously full of confidence after scoring his hat-trick prior to this game. So Norwich were just so much better than Hull, relentlessly good going forward, pretty solid at the back against a side who scored a lot of goals coming into the game. Suddenly, I mean, I can't really fathom how this is the same team as the one that I saw on opening day, who were just very poor. And it shows, again, as I've said this before, it shows that you just have to allow teams, especially with new managers, to develop, and they're developing very quickly. Although interesting to note that Angus Gunn, their keeper, came off injured at half-time with George Long coming in to replace him, which international break has come at a good time, and hopefully Gunn will come back. But yeah, Norwich, really impressive. I think for Hull, you just have to say that it was a disappointing performance against a good side, and they can take massive heart in what happened in the three games prior to this one.
The thing that I am taking a lot of heart from when it comes to Norwich and the, potential for this type of football really to become the norm rather than just, a pleasing every now and then at home. We've seen it twice in the last couple of weeks against Watford and now here, is that my main concern pre-season, which I talked about with the Talk Norwich City guys, was if you want to play a style that involves a, intricate build-up, doesn't need to be slow and all short passing, but intricate stuff where at some point someone needs to punch passes between the lines, then I was really worried about the players that they had at the back of the pitch, the back four, and basically their comfort in being able to do that. And I think now we're looking at a back four of Fisher, who had not broken into Norwich's team till this season, of Duffy, who looks so much more confident on the ball than I've ever seen before, of Cordoba, who of course was signed over the summer, we hadn't seen him play yet, and Doyle, who at that point when I spoke to the guys hadn't signed for them. And I would now, having watched those four as a unit, be really confident that those guys can be really strong ball progressors consistently and offer lots of different ways of doing so. And lastly, just looking at the fixture list so far, 9 of Norwich's games so far, or rather they've played 9 games so far, 7 against teams currently in the top half. So 7 of their 9 games against teams in the top half. You have to think that there could or should be at least a run of games coming up where Norwich fans might start licking their lips. And it'd be really interesting if this is the sort of performance that they put in regularly at home against Watford and Hull, teams that aren't necessarily, currently don't look like sort of automatic promotion contenders. We might see quite a lot of goals scored at Carrow Road this season. And now we go on to the only unbeaten team left in the EFL. That's a bit of a League One spoiler. See if you can work that one out. It's Sheffield United. George, they beat Luton 2-0 in the battle of two teams that came down last season. They're the only Championship team to win both games since we last spoke last Monday, Sheffield United, and they would be top without their 2-point deduction. Everything's looking pretty rosy.
Yeah, it really is. And the star of the show here was Jesran Raksaki on his 22nd birthday, scoring 2 goals. And 2 really well-taken goals as well. He's a player who... I can't think of many players like Raksaki who kind of burst on the scene on a first loan and then kind of disappear for a season, where he was just sat on Palace's bench for the most part last season. But he's come in at Sheffield United. He's been able to, they've kind of taken their time to bring him into the fold. And this was the day where he really benefited from it. And, I spoke on the betting show on Thursday about Luton and about how players who thrive in transitional moments should be the ones who dominate against Luton, given their poor defensive work. And Raksaki is clearly one of those who wasn't really on my radar because he hadn't really done it yet for Blades. But here he was absolutely brilliant. Such a good, direct goal-scoring threat, as we saw at Charlton and as he's showing again here. And the scariest thing about this, in my mind, is the reason I worry about Luton is because even though they've shown good moments going forward from a defensive point of view, they've looked really poor. But here they lacked anything. Like, it's looked at times like Rob Edwards is trying to change the way they play to go a more possessional style. Sheffield United, just had the ball in Luton's half for the majority of this game until they were 2-0 up, and then they could kind of set off a bit. And right now, as someone who obviously believes in Rob Edwards' ability and managerial ability, whatever he is trying to do to arrest this slide isn't really working. I can't really work out necessarily what it is either. So at the moment, wins against Luton, I think you have to, as impressive as Blades have been, and this is over the course of the whole season, this was just a run-of-the-mill routine 2-0 win. This wasn't, in my mind, a 2-0 win at home against a particularly difficult side to play against right now.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. The performances of Luton get ever more concerning. How about Michael Cooper, the Sheffield United goalkeeper? 6 clean sheets in a row. Obviously, defending is a team game, and we shouldn't actually focus just on the goalkeeper when we talk about clean sheets. But from a personal point of view for him, after what was quite a protracted summer transfer saga, and after what's been quite an injury hit last year or two for the talented young goalkeeper, that must be it must feel incredible to have started like that, and Blades fans loving his work, as you'd expect. Another 2-0 win came at Pride Park. Derby are loving life back in the Championship in home games. 4 wins and 1 defeat at home, and then 4 defeats away from home. So already we're seeing 2 sides to Derby County, really. And I know that there are Rotherham fans who remember their teams under Paul Warne in the Championship who are going, yep, that sounds pretty familiar to us. An ability to get things really cooking, pumping at home with the fans buying into it. It's incredibly powerful and very, very effective when it comes to picking up points. And for whatever reason, whatever works there simply cannot seem to work away from home. So that's the challenge, because it's a strength. Of course it's a strength to be this strong at home, to have that level of confidence every time you play home games. If you consider that to stay up in the Championship, maybe you need, let's say for argument's sake, 45 points. Well, you get 23 home games. And if you can beat a really strong home team that gets, let's say, I'm doing the maths as I talk, 1.6 points per game at Pride Park. They're well above that at the moment, of course. Then you're going to get 37 points just from your home games, and then being away from home isn't such a big issue. But they do need to be careful in case teams start to work out what they're doing at home, if there is something that other teams can start to overcome. QPR just fell away here. It was a pretty miserable first half, I think, all told. Not one to dwell on, but one of my favourite headers of the season put Derby ahead. Curtis Nelson heading a corner on the full from like 15 yards out, just straight into the top corner. Absolutely perfectly placed. And then 15 seconds after kickoff, Marcus Harness had flicked in a beautiful second goal. What a finish that was, after Derby had pressed QPR feeling a bit sorry for themselves, gone down 1-0, not in great form, not a good start to the season. A lot of the good vibes are starting to melt away, and they're just really slow on the ball and really lethargic, and no one seems to want to take the ball, and no one seems to want to give their teammates helpful passes, and they lost the ball and it was in the back of their net. 2-0 down, game over. What I will say, as I seem to say a lot when talking about Derby, is that I love their keeper, Jakob Wildel Zetterström, who is just so good. He's so good. Please, try and find a compilation of his saves this season. He's so athletic. He's got such good reach. His reflex stuff has been really, really exciting. I love that. And I love Marcus Harness as well, hopefully proving himself as a Championship player. It's a level that he's never played at until this season, despite having been so good in League One for so long. And when I saw him playing here, and the goal that he scored, and the way that he was knitting together attacks and helping in the press as well, I think his establishment in this team in that position could really raise the ceiling of Derby's attack, because so far with Mendes-Lang and Blackett, Taylor and Jackson, you've got great speed, you've got individual 1v1 skill. At the top of the pitch, you've got Jerry Yates, who's working really, really hard without much of a goal return, which is broadly what we've seen from Yates at Championship level. I think to have a Harness who just kind of, without necessarily standing out in any one particular aspect of his game, I think he's got the physical, the base level. I think he's got the ability to press all game, to work really hard out of possession, and to get forward in attack. He's got the technical level to knit things together maybe a bit more than they have elsewhere in the team. And I think he could be a really nice kind of addition to their front line. So great day for Derby. For QPR, 7 points from 9 games. As I say, looking so poor on the ball, and the Ars fans in NTT20 squad referring the absence of Clark Salter, who seems to be constantly in and out, of Ilias Chair, who came on here and hopefully will add something now that he's finally available. But they went from being a really dependable defensive team under Cifuentes as soon as he arrived to a bottom 8 defensive team per the underlying numbers at this stage of the season. And that is concerning because they have not improved with the ball nearly as much as they need to for that to end up kind of working out on balance. So not a good afternoon for them. Lots of thinking to be done over the international break. George, tell me about Plymouth Argyle 2, Blackburn 1. That's 3 home games for Argyle since the international break and 3 wins.
Yeah, I mean, they continue to really impress, I would say. Like, this is obviously not a particularly easy game against a side who were undone in midweek away at Coventry, but have had such a good start to the season. And I thought Argyle were really impressive in the way they went about their business. And when Michael Obafemi put them ahead midway through the first half with a nicely taken goal, the architect was Sissoko, who just looks like an absolute live wire for Argyle. Every time I see them play, he just loves getting on the ball and beating players and shooting and crossing. And it's, he's someone who I think teams like Argyle, who, the way they set up to play is I think always going to mean they give up a fair few chances. But Rooney seems to be trusting, as was the case under Schumacher, trusting attacking players to kind of express themselves. I think he looks like a very good fit for that club. And Argyle were good off the back of that as well. And when Rankin Costello scored with what I should say is like one of the best, an unbelievably well taken header. Like, he had to basically backpedal towards the byline and managed to get enough purchase on it to nod the ball back over Hazard into the back of the net, sparking immense limbs in the away end with the Rovers fans who went. Wayne Rooney felt like there was a foul in the build-up. It looks like there could have been, like, I can't be bothered to get into it. It's one of those where, like, if you're the home fans, it's an obvious foul. If you're an away fan, he's gone down too easily. Like, it's just I just don't really care. And
they won.
So who cares?
Even less reason to care.
But Wayne Rooney, gets a red card for complaining about that. And according to his coaching staff, ended up kind of celebrating with injured players in the tunnel when he had the winner go in, which was a Morgan Whittaker goal, which is, as is often the case, but a Morgan Whittaker header, which isn't often the case. A nice ball from Randall and Whittaker managing to pop up with what probably would have been the last kick or head of the game, regardless of where it had gone. And it was deserved. It was a deserved win. I just think, Argyle have been so much better than they were on opening day, most importantly, like, ignoring all the pre-season noise and the Rooney stuff. Like, they were so bad on opening day that it really felt like they might spiral, and they managed to put together a really good run of form with key attacking players performing well. And the kind of more and more the time goes on in the Championship, you're kind of looking around, like, as an Oxford fan, you're looking around for bad sides, and you're like, doesn't really feel like there are any, which is frustrating, but also good as a league.
It's a hell of a league, and I think that is exactly why. Watford beat Middlesbrough 2-1 from behind. George Edmondson had stabbed Barrow ahead after they'd squandered a couple of chances at 0-0 as well. Finazaz, frustratingly for you on the betting show, planting a header wide when well placed, and then blazing over also from the edge of the box, one that you'd expect normally Azaz to do better with. Latalath had a chance that he didn't take, and then they went ahead, and it felt like they could forget all of that and they wouldn't rue those missed chances. Borough going ahead as they did in midweek at West Brom, looking at 2 away wins on the bounce, which would just wipe away any of the concerns about the first month or so of the season. And instead, we're having the same conversations, really, because despite being the better side for a large part of this game, they then weren't. All of a sudden, I've seen people pointing at the substitutions that Carrick made, taking off Doak and Hamilton, who looked really good, and just losing some of that attacking verve as the new players took some time to get up to speed. And in the meantime, Watford seized their chances. Really nice equalising goal. Great transition attack, working it down the left side, having won the ball, and then turning and spreading it to Andrews, the right wing back, who I mean, I've banged on about this a bit, and it's not just because we had him in our 21 under 21 list, but it's partly due to that. I don't feel that Andrews gets as much love as he should do for a player of his age, doing what he's doing in the Championship on a fairly consistent basis. He is so quick. Like, just look at how quickly he gets forward to support attacks, and look how many goals this season. That has helped Watford to score because Andrews is there as the spare man on the right side when others have been sucked across. So really, really great goal. It was finished off by Kayembe from the edge of the box. And then near the end, a long throw, a flick on from Pollock, and Quadwo Barr smashing in. Great finish. It's been a good few weeks for Barr, and I'm so excited that we can finally watch him play because, having talked about him on Quest when he was 16, 17, playing for that Rochdale side, and then he kind of just didn't see him for a while, but he's a player that brings joy. He's an exciting player, a ball carrier, quick. He needs to work on some of his sort of number 9 type finishing, if that's the role he's going to play for Watford. And Lord, do they need someone to fulfil that role properly, because he did miss a 1-on-1 in midweek. But good instinctive volley, clean hit, 2-1 win, massive for Watford. David, who sent in a Sunday scouting report on Twitter, said, Barrow played some lovely stuff. Doak looked a constant threat, but Sema did well against him, and they didn't take enough chances. They allowed Watford back in the game. Barr is TC's perfect impact sub. So now we move into the draws. Plenty of them. Six,
How many you got?
five or six across the Championship, George. When is a draw a little more than a draw? When it's Sunderland 2, Leeds 2, and when it finishes like that. Perhaps the most memorable moment of the Championship season so far. Sunderland, I was going to say chucking the kitchen sink at Leeds to try and get an equaliser, but the ball forward was pretty poor with everyone forward. It sort of headed away. Alan Brown sort of shanks a ball back into the box that goes nowhere near any teammates, and it's just going straight down in Anne Mellier's throat.
But crucially, it seemingly takes a tiny nick off Junior Firpo.
Right, which turns it into
a little leggy.
A Shane Warne leggy. And Meslier, not a batsman, it turns out, did not pick it.
I mean, it was such a crazy moment. I mean, for that to happen at any point in any game would be memorable, but for it to basically be the last bit of action in a game between the two sides who have the biggest fan bases in the Championship by some measure, who are title favourites versus top of the league, Friday night under the lights, live on, it was I almost say an iconic moment in EFL folklore. Even on the Sky commentary, they said this will be a moment that's talked about for. I was going to say, what's it going to say? Seasons, decades.
Nice.
Decades. And I was like, yeah, maybe it will be. It was bizarre. And what's weird is that in this day and age, with all the different camera angles, I felt like we didn't have that perfect down the pitch. I want to see a little almost like a Hawkeye thing, so we could see exactly where it had gone. But I mean, for Leeds, it does feel like Leeds just have this incredible, insatiable appetite for just finding weird and wonderful ways just not to make their dominance count. Because this is another occasion where they went behind relatively early. Some pretty poor defending meant that Chris Rigg was able to prod home from close range. Basically, Leeds up to that point had only conceded about 1.7 XG in the whole season. And that was basically 1-in-1 shot from Rigg. But then Leeds' quality told. I thought Joel Peru was offside for the first goal. It was marginal, but it looked from the angle that I saw that he was off. But it was a brilliant ball and a very good header to make it 1-1. Firpo combining really well with Nonto. Again, not great defending from Sunderland, but a good finish from Firpo to make it 2-1. And from there, you thought Leeds would win the game. But as is often the case in these ones, game state's so important. And with Leeds ahead, Sunderland kind of came back into it without really looking like they were going to necessarily score. And they got a massive slice of luck from the home pitch. So, I mean, for Meslier, it's his stock has, I'd say, fallen pretty steadily over the last 3 seasons or so. And I know a lot of Leeds fans are frustrated by how often they feel like he does things that cost them points. And this occasion, I mean, I have no idea. You can say it's unlucky, but it doesn't happen very often, that does it? So you have to, I think, look at him and wonder how he was unable just to watch the ball safely into his arms.
Quite an interesting discussion over the weekend on NTT20 Squad off the back of this. A Leeds fan who I think was hurting, so I'm not going to dig him out, said, I know the narrative will be, if Leeds keep playing like that, they'll win the league. But please just stop. We aren't going to win the league.
Why?
Another Leeds fan saying, nope, spot on. destined to fail. I don't think you can appreciate this unless you're unlucky enough to be indoctrinated into Leeds, master specialists of failure. But then a new discussion that's happened on Sunday and Monday has been on the Championship chat thread. As we're heading into another international break, what would be interesting to know would be for fans to list the opponents that their team has faced this season in order of how impressed they were, how good they thought they were. And every single team that have played against Leeds have Leeds at the very top of that list. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean,
there's just, I can understand why people like associate characteristics with football clubs as if there's like part of their identity. Mm-hmm. But the idea that like a football club can be destined not to win a league, I would say is, well, I mean, you'd have to believe in some cosmic stuff for that to be the case, and a lot
of people do.
Yeah, I know. So I hope. I think they'll win the league.
Portsmouth drew 1-1 with Oxford. Happy? Yes, no.
Yes, Pompey were good. I thought Pompey bounced back from the disappointment of midweek very well. It felt like their fans and the players kind of fed off each other and were very up for it. Sorensen missed a penalty within the first 10 minutes. Pompey with a better side in the game and deserved to go 1-0 up when they did, albeit Oxford had missed a couple of chances. And it was a long-range deflected strike from Sibley that got us back into it. And I think we were definitely the happier side to go home with a point.
And Burnley 0, Preston 0, West Brom 0, Millwall 0, and Swansea 0, Stoke 0 were all matches that happened in the Championship and all quite nil-nilly. Except for potentially Swansea-Stoke. It should be mentioned per FOTMob that it was 19 shots for Swans to 10 to Stoke. 3 big chances to the 1. All of them missed. Just over 2 expected goals generated, but none scored for Swansea. I look at that, and particularly the fact that in the first half, Swansea had something like 14 or 15 shots to Stoke's 3. And I think if finishing had been better, Swans could have been 2 up at half-time, and given some of Stoke's recent performances, I think it could have got away from them. So I think they have got away with one a little there. And next week, obviously, it's international break in the Championship, but next Monday pod, Championship fans, make sure you tune in. We're going to do a sort of state of the nation across all 3 leagues. We're going to be highlighting some big takes from the first 9-10 games of the season, teams that are surprising us pleasantly or otherwise, who we think might go on and be the league champions and things of that nature. So make sure that you join us next week. Now on to League One. League One was where the party was at this weekend, for sure. Both the Championship and League Two littered with draws, but in League One it's just big results all over. And League One houses the only team that won all 3 fixtures over the last 10 days or so. Saturday plus midweek plus Saturday again. It was a stag party each time. Mansfield beating Blackpool 2-0. I like that this was Nigel Clough against Steve Bruce because, albeit it was a bit before my time, I understand that Nigel Clough was a sensational footballer in his Nottingham Forest era. Steve Bruce, obviously, a very, very well decorated footballer. And I had fun. Transfermarkt is quite amazing. Nigel Clough's playing career, like all the stats are still on there, even though he retired, like early 00s. I went back and found a game from, I think, 87, 88, where Clough's Nottingham Forest were playing against Steve Bruce, Manchester United. They had so many battles against each other in the sort of pre-Premier League era and then the first few years of the Premier League. And they went head-to-head in the dugout here. And Nigel Clough won this one, even if Brucey's got the majority of the league medals, Premier League medals. Here's what I liked about this one. That is Mansfield in possession. Blackpool setting up in quite a narrow 4-4-2, kind of mid-block, out-of-possession shape. All the rage these days, in vogue. And that's because it's quite hard to play through. So what do? You give it out wide to your fullback McLaughlin, who's good at crossing. And he just slings in across from like 40 yards away from goal with no one in the box, only really Will Evans to aim for. And he just sticks it to the back stick and he hopes for the best. And what happens? Will Evans peels off the back of the fullback. The cross is perfect onto the instep of his volley, and a bit of a scruffy finish. But my point is, George, it's 1-0. It's McLaughlin to Will Evans.
Yeah, and this was because it's been a very much a front two for Mansfield for the most part this season, with Evans and Gregory being actually a great blend for a front two. Like Evans is the burly target man who can be the player that you want to aim for in the box, who's got the physical ability to dominate within it, and the goal scoring nous to do so as well. And then Gregory, the more experienced player, who's despite being at 34 still full of energy and has the quality to score some great goals as we've seen. But Gregory was out for this one, so it was Wayne who came in for Gregory, and Evans kind of, I guess, playing more as a proper target man in a 4-3-3. And yeah, I mean, for him to get the 2 goals, 2 shots and 2 goals in a game of very few chances, I'm delighted for him. I think he's a really smart signing. I think he's someone who will score a lot of goals for Mansfield in the right system. And with him on 4 goals already, and I think Gregory on 5, I think Mansfield have a, dare I say, a stag party at the top end of the pitch. So, yeah, they scored 2 goals in each of their last 4 games. They won all 4. They're making it look pretty easy. And this was against the Blackpool side, who, as we say, their results have been good. Under Bruce, their performances have been good. They don't give many chances away. But Mansfield didn't need many because 2 great balls from McLaughlin, 2 good finishes from Evans.
Yeah, very much the groom, Will Evans, and the best man, Stephen McLaughlin, on this stag party.
So who's Lee Gregory?
He's the brother of the bride who had too much to drink previously.
Yeah.
Couldn't make it out for this one.
Yeah, nice.
The older brother of the bride, couple of kids,
dominated
bags
early.
under the eyes. He's gone early because he's off the leash, and he's had to take himself back.
I feel like that's what I'm becoming.
Wasn't going to say it.
Me and Lee.
Yes, 5 wins in a row for the Stags and 3 clean sheets as well, having registered none in their first 6 games of the season. It's worth pointing out that the first 4 wins of this streak were all against teams currently in the bottom 5, so they had quite a nice fixture list. But how about beating the previously unbeaten in 5 Blackpool? Thank you very much for a lovely game of 5s. 2 wins in a week for 3 other teams in League One. One of them, Bristol Rovers, who beat Burton 3-1. Now, those who listen closely to the show will remember something along the lines of me asking you, why are Bristol Rovers so bad last week?
What did I say?
And you saying, yeah, well, it's funny that it's not so much why are they so bad, it's like, are they so bad? And yeah, I think they are so bad.
No.
That's what we said.
I was hoping I was going to go the other way.
2 wins, back-to-back. Crisis? What crisis? But, be honest, Rovers fans. When you were 1-0 down at Burton at half-time, did any of you have anything to say to the gaffer? Hey? To the team? To each other? What sort of things were you muttering or chuntering or potentially even screaming?
Wow.
That's what I'd like to know, because it was 1-0. It was Danilo Orsi, but Burton have the consistency of wet tissue paper. 3-1 the final score. The 1-1 goal. Good bit of strength from Omakere. Slipped in Shaq Ford, whose finish was quite confusing. Sort of scuffed it.
Yeah.
Confused the goalkeeper, and it went in for 1-1. 2-1, lightning counter-attack not long after. Burton giving the ball away. All of a sudden, it's like 5-on-3. Bristol Rovers work it nicely. The back stick is smashed in. And then the third goal to finish it off, another lightning counter-attack with Burton having committed everyone forward. And you watch Rovers attack like that, and although it's not easy to generate counter-attacking opportunities for yourself regularly, there are ways that you can set up a team where they become, more likely. And I do wonder if that might be a good approach for Rovers, given the players that they have in attack. What they haven't been able to do this season is be particularly good at breaking teams down in terms of like quality possession play. So I wonder if this could be a better approach for them. The issue being, in order to do this and for it to be effective, you have to also be quite a strong defensive unit, and Bristol Rovers so far this season have not been that. So that is really what needs to improve. I mean, I certainly think the same about Burton. Watching the goals back, the words that spring to mind are open, weak, slow, just like almost like quite unserious, this Burton team, in the way that they seemingly give up leads when they have them without putting up that much of a fight. They easily get eased off the ball or out-strengthed, if that's a word. Watching them run back in transition and watching opposition players speeding past them to support attacks, leaving their defence exposed. I mean, it's really poor. It's just poor all round defensively. And like, they have played some quite nice stuff, and some of the stuff they talked about in the summer when they built this squad and hired Mark Robinson, there are flashes of quality going forward. I won't deny that, but they're just being completely undermined by this terrible defensive kind of personality as much as anything else. And I think there's a lack of physicality in the squad. I think like the sorts of things that are almost like non-negotiables that earn you the right to play this way, particularly if you've got not one of the biggest budgets in the league. I'm not sure that they are full of those sorts of non-negotiables, intangibles, whatever you want to call it. Some of them are very tangible. Strength and speed, ability to defend your box, like that sort of stuff. They look small and slow, and it's hard to succeed, I think, in the EFL if you're small and slow, because, again, you don't give yourself the platform to do the fun stuff. Very concerning start to the season, which is the case also for Cambridge United, who I believe have 1 point, George, and lost at Exeter.
Yeah, it's interesting. Cambridge put out a statement today off the back of this 1-0 defeat at Exeter, and I think a lot of Cambridge fans hoped that if there was going to be a statement, it would be to communicate the change of manager. This is not one of those statements. This is one of those where they basically just say, like, look, we know things are bad, but the underlying numbers aren't that bad, and we're all working really hard to try and make it better. Which is, I mean, it's better than saying nothing, I would
Last
say.
one of those I saw was Notts County, when Stuart Maynard's reign had started really poorly.
Yeah.
People took the piss out of them for it, and actually, Stuart Maynard's doing really well now.
Yes.
So, you know.
Yeah. Interesting, their note within the
It might not actually be
statements.
true, though. That's the problem. Is it true?
Well, the underlying numbers being okay.
Yeah.
Well, when you're they haven't been ahead all season, so yeah, I mean, game state's going to mean that you are. If you spend the majority of your season behind in games, you're probably going to create chances.
It's easy to play when you're 2-0 down.
Correct. So, you know, and they also say in the statement that Cambridge they increased the budget significantly in the summer, but which still meant they were one of the lowest budgets in the league. You know, I think they're looking for reasons as to why things aren't good, whilst also assuring the fans that things, you know, they're trying to get things to improve. But there's no denying how poor they are. And, you know, I think when you look at their team, you know, they've got a lot of like attacking or players who should be attacking players in their side starting games. But in my mind, a front three of Loft and Ndulu and Kashunga is so muddled. Like, I don't, if you play 3-4-3, you want real quality in my mind in wide areas where there's such a massive reliance at the moment on Bennett, who plays as their attacking right wing back for that width.
I think they've got some absences.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
don't help. With
they absolutely do. And I'm not
Stokes, for example,
yes.
and others.
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean,
but yes,
yeah. Longello and Kaika came off the bench, who in my mind I would say would be kind of, I guess, quality-wise, you wonder. But I just, from an attacking point of view, they look relatively easy to defend against right now. And you basically have 3 strikers on the pitch there, none of whom really getting any service. The performance levels are pretty poor. For Exeter here, it was a car crash goalkeeping from Reyes at the start of the move. You know, he is someone who, his goals prevented numbers are pretty concerning. I think it's minus 4.5 as per football this season already. So shot stopping not great. He came out to try and punch across and completely missed it. There was a bit of a scramble and the ball came out to Ryan Woods, who, you know, it was his first goal in 7 years, but he finished it like he
incredible.
He was you know, he's used to doing a brilliant finish in the top right hand corner.
Redemption for Woods, because last week there was an unfortunate viral clip of him filmed from the stands where, because he's never been the most mobile, shall we say, never been the most athletic, but the caption was something that said, "Has this guy soiled himself?" Because that's the way it looks when he runs, and unfortunately it was quite funny. But it can't be nice to go viral for something like that.
Maybe he had.
I don't think he had.
Was that James Wade? Did you see that a couple of weeks ago?
Mm-hmm.
That's funny.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, for Cambridge, they will feel aggrieved that quite a lot of their games are fairly marginal. You know, it was the same against Rotherham the week before, where the ball kind of looped in the air and hit Sam Nombe on the bum and went in. Like they're finding pretty inventive ways to lose games. You know, you concede off the bum one week, and then you concede to a guy who hasn't scored in 7 years, and next you lose both games 1-0. Like, that's interesting. And you know, similar to our chat about Coventry earlier on, like they probably will improve at points relatively soon. Like we've seen it with, I guess, Cardiff recently. Like even teams who are performing to a pretty low level, struggling to create chances. Defensively, they're not terrible. Cambridge, like they're not conceding loads of chances within games themselves. They play Wigan at home next after the international break, which already feels like a 0-0 for the ages.
And there aren't, unfortunately for them, there's actually quite a small group of teams that I would put in the category of like relegation candidates at this point. Even if you're quite broad with it, even if you include like, you know, teams that have started all right because you just feel like they might get sucked in, it's still quite a small group. in a league where famously there are 4 relegation spots, which doesn't help them with chasing it, even if they do put a good run together.
Like if you think of their season so far, their only point came in a 4-4 draw, right, against Blackpool.
Fever dream of a game,
which was just a ridiculous game anyway. But so that's the only game they haven't lost. They haven't been ahead in any games. However, they've only lost by more than a solitary goal twice. So they lose by 1 goal like week in, week out. And I would say the more concerning aspect would be if you're being blitzed consistently. So I mean, I think the issue is you lose ground so quickly, and it's hard to get that back. And we saw last season with Cheltenham how they turned their form around this time, having had a terrible first couple of months of the season, and despite turning into a mid-table side from the end of October onwards, they were unable to avoid relegation, and that is the issue at this time for Cambridge United.
They've lost a lot of ground. One team full of ground, Exeter. What a start to the season for them. 5 wins in their 9 games, 16 points, 7th in the table, 1.78 points per game, 4 clean sheets in a row. And you referenced the unfortunate Reyes in goal for Cambridge, who's not having a good time. How about the flip side of that in nets for Exeter? Crystal Palace loanee Joe Whitworth, who has the best save percentage in League One, the best goals prevented per Opta in League One, and it's just generally looking really good. 20-year-old goalkeeper, made more saves in this one, I think it was 4 to be precise. And look, Exeter have some fine players in amongst the team, but at the moment, the main feature, to my eyes, of the level of points that they're picking up is because of the clean sheets, and the clean sheets come down to a good defensive unit, and Sweeney, Fitzwater and Yefeko, the centre-backs, Niskanen, McMillan, the wing-backs, Woods and Francis sitting and screening, but it is still Whitworth who's the star, so he gets more big ups from us. Another team that won 2 last week, Rotherham. Now, a midweek's win off the bum of Nombe was significant because it was their first away win for 17,000 years. And then they followed it up with a win at home to Reading. 2-1!
Yeah, having gone behind to a Lewis Wing ping. I think this is a big week for Rotherham and for Steve Evans, because clearly it had not started well. And to go 1-0 down, as you say, the away form so poor, to win in midweek and then to come here at home against a side who won 3 on the bounce, who, despite all of Reading's clear off-pitch issues, are a good side. To go 1-0 down and, despite winning these 2 games back-to-back, they sit in 17th still, Rotherham. So it kind of shows just how much trouble they'd have been in had they not managed to stop the slide. Nombe with a close range finish. I think him getting scoring is going to be really important for Rotherham. He was one of the big outliers in terms of chances missed so far this season. Before that one, the aforementioned bum went in off his arse, and then he's come and he scored a decent finish after half time here. A Dauphin with the second. It looked to me like possibly a foul on Burton. It's a classic Steve Evans, like a looping ball in the box, and about 5 Rotherham players just surround the keeper. And the Dauphin manages to rise highest and nod the ball in the back of the net. A Basherman with a red card for a pretty stupid off-the-ball incident. So frustrating for Reading, but it feels like Rotherham are starting to get a grip on what they need to do under Evans in order to be the kind of team we thought they were going to be. And it would be no surprise to me at all if we see them go on a bit of a run at some point.
I haven't seen that much pressure on a Button since I put my old suit on the other day.
Very good.
Wrexham 4, Northampton 1. There is not much this season in the EFL that gets my loins fizzing. Should get that looked at. Like a highlight that starts with Wrexham right wing back Ryan Barnett receiving the ball 1v1 up against a fullback with no one else within 10 metres of them. You're on an island. Fullback, what are you going to do against Kobe Bryant's favourite wing back Ryan Barnett? Because this mano-a-mano battle tends to be won by the mano playing for Wrexham, with his unusual but quite nice, lovely, upright gait. The sort that to me suits maybe being like a stylish number 4 for the England cricket team, as much as it does playing right wing back in League One. He's got a bag of tricks, Ryan Barnett. He sizes up the defender. He rolls the ball with his left foot. Does he want to cut inside? He's done that before to good effect. No, he does not. little step over with the left foot, jink down the line and digs out a cross. Now, at this point, you're thinking, Ali, you've just described the sort of dribble that hundreds of EFL players can do and do every single week. And you're right, but how many of those hundreds, how many can match it with a beautiful, accurate, arcing cross, just teasing the defenders, begging to be attacked? Very, very few of them. There's very few EFL players within that, what's it called? What's that one called in maths?
Venn diagram.
Venn diagram. Not my strong point. James McLean, backstick, bosh, 1-0. Thank you very much. Equaliser from Cam McGeehan from a set piece. Then guess who gets the ball? It's our friend Ryan Barnett again with his black boots.
He's so good.
He's classy. He's unassuming. Underestimate him with his black boots, if you like. Think, oh, he's not skillful. Yes, he is. Flies forward, crosses when running at full speed, straight into the path of McLean, cut back, Marriott, 2-1. How about the 3-1 goal where Wrexham work the ball forward? They look to their right. Who's there? Our hero, our idol, Ryan Barnett. Now this time, the fullback doesn't get tight. He's been burned too many times before. He doesn't want to dance with Barnett, and that's fine, says our hero. I'll just take a touch and just cross that one to the edge of the 6-yard box. Elliot Lee header, 3-1. Not long after that, long ball in behind, Marriott with a back heel to Palmer. He miscontrols it. And at that point, he loses his confidence. He wants to get rid of it. Where will he turn? To the right. Who's there? Ryan Barnett. Fullback's like, ugh, do I get tight? Do I not get tight? That's the question. Decides it'd be more embarrassing to get tight and be beaten than just stand 5 metres in front of him. Barnett says, okay, take a touch, cross, James McLean, 4-1.
Easy game.
It's a mega Wrexham win. It's them regaining confidence after seemingly losing it a little after defeat from Birmingham. It's their 5th straight win at home this season. But I'm fixated on this somewhat like old school looking wingback, Ryan Barnett.
You know, and crossing the ball twice for quite an old school wingback to score in James McLean.
He only got 2 assists for those 4 goals.
But you're giving him 4.
Well, because one of them was cut back by McLean, and then the last one was deflected, the cross, and the finish, I think, was going wide.
That is one of my least favourite rules.
He's my sweet, sweet prince, and I'm giving him 4 assists. George, Charlton 1, Birmingham 0.
Oh, boy.
Charlton, they weren't happy before this one. They leave it. The first team to beat Birmingham in the league this season.
Well, they spent a fortune, Charlton. So this is quite fun, where Charlton win the game 1-0. Charlton off the back of, was it 3 consecutive defeats, having been beaten 3-2 by Bristol Rovers. A team in Charlton who their defensive solidity had looked so good early in the season that it didn't really matter. They weren't very good going forward, and that went. And suddenly we saw a side who were shipping goals. And then they come up against the Birmingham City side, who have been the best team in the league so far this season, who have an embarrassment of riches when it comes to players at their disposal and just money. And they only had 3 shots, Birmingham, in the whole game, 2 of which were blocked at source.
Wow.
So just the one shot.
Sorry.
That wasn't blocked.
Bottled at source. Blocked at source.
Blocked
That's
at source.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just the one shot.
In the valley.
That actually went further than about 3 yards in the game. So for Charlton to find that defensive prowess, I think is important for them. A really nicely taken finish by Matty Godden. And then we had this post-match interview, which was funny. Watching this unfold in retrospect on Twitter when going on Sunday morning was amusing, because a couple of Charlton journos tweeted about the quote, which is that after the game, Birmingham manager Chris Davis, when he was first asked about the result, said, well, Charlton has spent fortunes, and they're a very good League One side, and how it's not Birmingham and the rest, it's League One. And the initial reaction from a lot of Birmingham fans was like, he hasn't said that, like, prove it, because he obviously hasn't said that.
Yeah. And
then the clips come out of him saying it, and the immediate reaction is, he's got you all on strings. He's got you all.
Chris Davis will not be paying rent this month.
And it's, it's funny, because I don't know what, I mean, it doesn't sound sarcastic.
I want him to be like having a bit of a laugh.
Yeah,
because
so do I.
That line has been used by every opposition manager.
Yeah.
So I expected him to say it quite clearly, like joking.
Yeah.
But if he is doing that, he doesn't give himself the chance to get credit for it, because he then carries on with quite a serious answer.
Yeah.
So it's like he makes the gag, but it's so dry and so subtle
So
that no one
deadpan.
could possibly
I
see
know.
it as such.
I know. And
I'm going
also,
to take it as a gag, though. And if it is, that is quite a good gag.
it is quite a good gag. But the funny thing is like, just if you're the opposition from a Birmingham side, and if you're a Birmingham fan, you've beaten a team in League One, I don't understand why you would get rattled about the opposition manager being like, their budget's like 10 times ours, so why aren't they going to beat us? Like,
Steve Evans spent like a week before and after his game against Birmingham, like, they're the most fantastic League One team I've ever seen.
Yeah, like it's it's kind of true. I don't see why you'd be like,
yeah.
So and the funny thing is that Charlton had spent quite a lot of money for League One level before Birmingham came along and spent way more, and it was like, well, why does that matter anymore? So anyway, I mean, in Nathan Jones, Charlton certainly have a manager who's bought into this project, and it was from a defensive point of view, as impressive as anything we saw this weekend was managing to completely stifle a Birmingham attack that we know will be very good this season. So and I think there's an element to this as well where we've spoken about how Birmingham maybe haven't been quite as dominant as we'd expect in some games this season, and the perception has been like, well, they'll go through the gears at some point, but for them to get beaten away from home 1-0 against a side who haven't been in great form maybe just opens up the possibility a little bit to teams who are chasing them that maybe it's not going to be a procession.
And to have a manager at the helm who, regardless of what you think about Charlton's recent performances and particularly how poor they've been going forward, to have someone who has the tactical ability to play in midweek and then have a game against the best team in the league on the Saturday, to change shape away from what they've done so far this season and what they did in midweek, to play what was basically like a diamond or a 4 kind of box 2, 4-2-2-2, a shape that they hadn't played all season, and for it to be, for his instructions were very specific with what he was asking his players to do out of possession, basically going man for man with Birmingham to try and make sure they didn't make it easy for them to progress the ball into their final third, and they succeeded with it. Now the players should take unbelievable credit for executing that, because that is the hardest job. But I think for someone to have been able to change the shape, get the detail into the players in that space of time, and have them execute it so well reflects very well on Jones. I know that the fullbacks Edwards and Kane Ramsey got a lot of love as well from the Charlton fans for their performances here. I had a close eye on Huddersfield Barnsley before the game because of some simmering, shall we say, tensions pre-game. Both teams not in great form after decent starts and fairly lofty expectations, and both managers had some interesting quotes in the week. Michael Duff getting some stick for saying a quote that looks way worse written down than it did in the actual press conference, which is when he's talking about his players being low on confidence, said, if there was a magic wand, I wouldn't be sat here. I'd be sitting on a beach somewhere in probably the Maldives or something. But that's the same as every football manager. People go through peaks and troughs. We're in a trough at the minute. If you could inject your players with liquid confidence as a manager, you would be retired by the age of 45 because you'd have made so much money and had so much success that you could retire to the Maldives. I think that's what he's getting at.
Yeah, that's weird.
Why?
I don't know any successful manager that's retired at 45.
Kloppo might go.
He's older than 45.
Okay.
You got Pep Guardiola, who is still working.
Okay, well, let me back up Mike Duff here. Maybe he's suggesting if he had that ability, he would also be able to apply it to business and make loads of money, and he wouldn't need to be a football manager.
So basically, if I was a wizard, I'd have a completely different life.
If there was a magic wand, there you go.
Harry Potter, Maldives never mentioned. 8 books.
No, he didn't he didn't tan well. Darryl Clark, he said,
I had to apply extra cream to the scar.
I can't honestly say that I know what my best 11 is or my best shape. Now that, as you can imagine, didn't go down that well either. So I was looking at this game quite closely, and Huddersfield won it 2-0. A pretty slow start. Barnsley had a couple of early efforts, and then Huddersfield really flew into gear from about the 20th minute onwards. And they were clearly the better side for the next hour. The only problem was that they couldn't score. They had 15 shots, and none of them went in, and it was drifting to a 0-0 until Ben Wiles received a cutback and stuck one in the top corner. Now, Wiles has got some stick for his performances recently, but he's also got 4 goals this season for Huddersfield, 2 of them from outside the box. That is something that he offers that not a lot of midfielders at this level do offer. He's their joint top scorer with Karoma, and then Kasumu from range made it 2-0. Huddersfield have scored the most goals in the league from outside the box. They still haven't clicked at the very top end of the pitch. I noticed that Bojan Radulovic started in this one and looked dangerous at times. He's an interesting profile of a striker for me, and I'd like to see him get a run of games. I think there's a chance in a decent team he could end up scoring quite a few goals, but it's fair to say that the first 9 months of his Huddersfield career have not gone very well. We also had Wycombe 1, Crawley 0. Wickham now unbeaten in 7 league games, having lost their first 2, 5 wins and 2 draws in that time, flying at the moment, and didn't fly past Crawley, but a comfortable 1-0 win, I'd say. The goal was pretty simple. I think it was second phase of a set piece, got worked out wide, and McCleary was able to just fire it across the 6-yard box for Onyedinma Dinma to tap in. And they had a few other chances to score. Crawley went closest through. Forster hit the bar from range. I'd be pretty excited if I were a Wycombe fan right now. The run is obviously good. The style of football, I think, is exciting. And for Wycombe, it is fresh. It is somewhat new. It is a different style of play than they played when they were last successful. So I think there's a freshness to it as well. You have a guy in the dugout who is one of your biggest ever icons as a player, who is also, thank God, making it work in the dugout. Because is there anything worse than getting a club legend back and then failing in the dugout? And you look at the fixture list and you think this could definitely continue as well. If they are a genuinely, performing as it looks like a top 6 team, then there should be quite a few wins in the next month as well for Wycombe. As for Crawley, Rob Elliott is obviously their manager. He's replaced Scott Lindsay. For those who don't follow the National League, he was Gateshead manager. He took over from Mike Williamson, having been involved previously under Williamson. Took Gateshead to the playoffs, where they weren't able to compete because of some sort of stadium regulation nonsense. They won the FA Trophy. So he really did have, I think he won Manager of the Month as well in August. So he really did have a great first year as a manager. He was kind of the hot name out of non-league, wasn't he? Linked with the Carlisle job as well. So we have this nice sort of managerial circle of life at the moment, George, where Elliott got the Crawley job Elliott got the Gateshead job because Mike Williamson went to MK Dons. Carlisle hired Mike Williamson when sacking Paul Simpson. MK Dons responded by hiring Scott Lindsay from Crawley, who then hired Rob Elliott from Gateshead. So basically, Paul Simpson has to be the next Gateshead manager to sort of seal this managerial vortex. Otherwise, it would be left open forever.
You told them?
I haven't told them. I want them to work that out for themselves. Peterborough 2, Stevenage 1.
This is a bit of fun.
Mm-hmm.
My favourite part, Peterborough go ahead early on with a long-range strike, very well taken, before Stevenage definitely justifiably and deservedly make it 1-1 through Thompson midway through the second half, only for a very late goal from Kwame Poku, who currently leads the goal-scoring charts in League One, which is quite fun. You have to think that he is someone who, if he can maintain this run of form to the end of the season, is going to go for a lot of money and be the latest posh asset to be sold. But it was a good finish from Poku with his left foot after a set piece. The kind of ball fell to him and he fired it into the bottom left-hand corner, and then basically ran the length of the pitch. He ran the length of the pitch to celebrate in front of the Stevenage fans. But he kind of ran there, got to Stevenage fans, did one jump and shout, and then just turned around and ran away again. And I just, not
full Adebayor then.
But it was full. He knew as soon as he scored he was going to do that. He was like, "This is my plan. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go and shout in their face." And I think he got there and he bottled it a little bit, but it was still fun to see. Even though this was a defeat for Stevenage, and I think for Peterborough, as we say every time they win, it's important. This it feels like they're developing week on week and are showing a level of form that's good. But I think of all the teams in the EFL, from my pre-season perception of what they would be and where they are now, Stevenage are probably the ones that I've maybe had to rewire, because I was very concerned about them. I thought they were destined for a relegation battle. I thought, given that Alex Ravel was at the helm in League Two when they struggled, there was little reason to think that he would be someone who could come in and be the right replacement for Evans. But I think they're, from a defensive point of view, have been really solid. They're creating chances within games. I think they are, at the worst, they look like mid-table, and at best they could be a bit better than that. So credit to them, albeit off the back of a defeat. But yeah, good scenes at the end of the game.
Well, if they are to get towards the top, they'll need to get near Lincoln, because they beat Leyton Orient 2-1. Quiet first half here, probably shaded by Orient, the away side, if anything. Tom James hitting the bar from range. One of those where Wickens, Lincoln's big keeper, he sees a shot from range. He thinks, I know where my posts are. That's going over the bar. So it goes literally over his head, doesn't put his arms up, hits the bar. And if he had reacted a little more relaxed, I'd have said that is classy. You know that wasn't going in, but there was a bit of panic in the way that he turned around and looked at the goal. So James almost catching him out. But Lincoln impressive in the second half. So Scubala's half-time words and or tweaks worked here. There was a great assist from Tom Hamer for Makama's first goal. Sort of central midfielder had it. I think it was Derikwa actually. Floated one to the right-hand side of the box, and Hamer sprints, leaps, thumping header over the top of the fullback, across goal for Makama to then steer in his own header for 1-0. And not long after, Freddie Draper with the sort of confident quality finish that has me very excited. Draper has had a remarkable, 15 months or so, where after an amazing spell in the League of Ireland, he came over to Walsall and he was so impressive in the first half of the season. But he basically hadn't had a break because the dates of the Irish League. And I think in the second half of the season, after he was recalled by Lincoln, we saw him just look a little bit tired at a higher level than he'd ever played before. And you wondered if maybe it was worth him getting another confidence-boosting loan in League Two. But actually, with this finish, it looks to me like he's looking sharp again, and that's exciting. Dan Adjei pulled one back for Orient. It was quite a nervy finish, actually. The very last action of the game was McGrandles clearing one off the line after a good Wicken save. So Orient going pretty close, but losing. I think it kind of sums up both teams at the moment. Tight games that Lincoln are getting the better of, and Orient are not. They've got really poor points return. They're right down there at the moment with 8 points from their 10 games. And I found this interesting, thinking about these two teams and seeing the fact that it was quite a well-balanced game between what looks to me like evenly matched teams. That's how I think of Lincoln and Orient, but there's 10-point gap between them already. Lincoln have 10 points more than Orient. So I thought, okay, maybe the way that I am ranking and rating these teams is wrong. Like, what could be the reasons for this? And if you dig a little bit deeper and look at the numbers, they concede basically the same amount of shots, but Orient's chances that they concede are of much higher quality. Only Bristol Rovers have a worse XG per shot number faced in the league this season. So the chances that they're giving up are really, they're not suppressing the opposition. Going forward, two teams basically take the same amount of shots. In fact, Orient takes slightly more shots than Lincoln, but again, the quality is very different. Orient's are of generally low quality, and Lincoln's much more adept at just getting better chances. And I think this boils down to style to quite a large extent. Lincoln are bottom of League One for possession. They do not want the ball because they know that by letting you have the ball with their force field of a defence, that when they win the ball back, they are going to be in position to break quickly. And they have two up top, whether it's Makama, Draper, Kadamatri or House. They've got players, they can make two changes after an hour, keep the pressure on at the top of the pitch, keep the speed. And it's really, really effective. Whereas Orient's more possession-based style, much slower attack, much more bodies behind the ball for the opposition to deal with. It's on to them to break teams down. And A, that's difficult, and B, they're not doing it well at all. So their attack is looking a lot less potent than Lincoln's at the moment. Bolton and Shrewsbury drew 2-2. Shrews took a 2-0 lead in this one, something of a surprise. The second goal was an absolute cracker from
another fun celebration.
Jordan Shipley, who runs to the side of the pitch, who looks at the Bolton bench and, per my lip reading ability, says, "Pick me up. Just effing pick me up." And he's basically saying, and this is amazing, I just watched the clip, in April, away at the Reebok, whatever it's called, the Unibowl, the tough sheet, corner to the edge of the box, Shipley, first time, volleys it in for Shrewsbury.
No way.
The second time this calendar year that he has scored the exact same goal. So, fair enough.
Ian.
Surely in the pre-match meetings they were like, lads, you remember April, yeah?
Pick him up.
Shipley.
Yeah.
And instead of going pick him up, they've gone, he won't do it again.
Let him shoot.
He has.
Do you ever do that when you play football?
Shoot?
I know you do that, where you shout, let him shoot at someone.
Oh, yeah.
And then when they do score, it's one of the worst things.
All day.
One of those feelings.
That's why I shoot.
Yeah.
All day, boys.
Yeah.
People get really wound up about it.
But it's a 0.01 XG chance, so every 100 times you shout that, you're going to look like an idiot.
That's fine. I don't mind. Bolton did get back level, though, through Dempsey and Schön. And that was the end of the scoring. There wasn't as much sort of late Alamo-type attacking as you might have expected. There was drama after full-time. Ian Evatt and Feeney of Shrewsbury having a disagreement that led to Ian Evatt doing the old lean the head in.
Pressing his head against his head.
He looked very angry.
I think we need to change the terminology around headbutt into head press. Head press is a red card.
Yeah.
Get rid of the butt. talk about butts a lot in this pod.
Yeah. Okay. And Stockport 0, Wigan 0 was a match that happened. 6 clean sheets in a row for Wigan in the league.
Unbelievable.
Absolutely unbelievable.
But the tickle monster.
The tickle doing very well in goal. In League 2, we had a ton of draws. We got a match on Monday night, but still some significant results to tell you about. Doncaster Rovers, the only team in League 2 to win both since we last spoke on the Monday pod. Now, Newport could do that if they beat Bradford at Valley Parade on Monday night. But as we record, it's just Donny who have had the dream week. And they beat Grimsby 3-0 at Blundell Park. And they were well clear by half-time. And you have to laugh a little bit. And I feel bad to bring this up, but Dave Artell in the week, right? He directly compared his side's defensive structure in their win over Gillingham to the legendary AC Milan side of the 1980s. And he said, our shape was outstanding, our work rate was outstanding. It was like watching AC Milan under Arrigo Sacchi at one point. Now, what makes this even better, it's not just the fact that they then conceded 3 goals against Doncaster. It's the fact that tactic connoisseurs will know one of the great personality traits of that Milan defence was their offside trap, was their high defensive line, which helped them maintain pressure on opponents, but almost never got caught out, even though high lines, can be vulnerable to that. So when the ball was played through by Luke Molyneux, splitting the Grimsby back line, and Jordan Gibson ran on for a 1-on-1, which he didn't take at first, but scored the rebound, I did chuckle. You had to chuckle at that. Now, I am liable to compare teams to like Brazil 1970 quite a lot. In the midweek pod, Under the Lights for NTT20.com subscribers, I compared Notts County's goals to Manchester City. So I'm a fan of an exaggerated comparison. It's just unfortunate that his defence weren't able to be Baresi and co on this occasion. So it was Molyneux to Gibson, then it was Sterry to Molyneux, which means that... and then the third goal was Gibson as well, another lightning counter-attack, pretty shambolic from a Grimsby point of view. Gibson and Molyneux have 8 goals between them this season already. That's Donny's 2 wide forwards. It's just great level of goal contribution to get from that position of the pitch. And I think there's an easy excuse for Grimsby here, which I'm willing to accept. They had been at Carlisle last Saturday. Mm-hmm. Then they went to Gillingham. And
a lot of travelling.
You've done a lot of driving to
and from Lincolnshire,
in and around the Grimsby region.
You're doing it this weekend.
Not easy, is it?
Who are they playing? You
wouldn't win a home game against Donny after that. I tell you that.
No.
As for Donny, they do look.
Although Donny famously very close, so they had nowhere to travel at all. Donny,
right?
Very quick.
No wonder they won.
Exactly.
And they'd had home games previously. They look electric, don't they? Doncaster are at their best. They attack with such speed and they get such quality from those wide players in particular. Their next 2 home games against Crewe and Swindon, I think that'll be interesting because I still don't think we've seen Doncaster do a lot of breaking down of low block type stuff. And that's fine for the moment. They're able to generate tons of quick transition attacks. So I think against Crewe and against Swindon, teams that have decent defensive records, I think they're going to be quite hard to break down and unlikely to give them space to attack into. So I just think it's games on paper that Donny fans will look at and think, yeah, we should dominate, we should win this. There's just that aspect of their attack I think they might need to prove themselves, and that could be quite awkward opponents for them. Notts County, they had an awkward opponent in the form of Port Vale, who went to Notts and won 1-0.
They went to Notts. They said, Notts, you guys have the ball. We're fine with it. You guys just take it. Just take it. We don't want the ball. And Notts were like, okay, we'll have the ball.
Thank you.
And then Port Vale were like, but we're going to score quite early on. And it's going to be Laurent Tolai, who I want to talk about in a second. And then they went 1-0 up. A good finish from Tolai. And then they were like, now you can really have the ball. And we really don't want the ball. And Notts were like, okay. And they had it. And they didn't do much with it. Jatta had one header that hit the crossbar, went over the bar. But for the most part, Port Vale were pretty comfortable 1-0 up away from home at Notts County. And watching the game back, the Jody Jones hole, who's obviously got this fractured shin, I think it is, who's out till the new year, was fairly evident in terms of just lacking that bit of, they're so reliant on his quality from wide. And I think it gives them, because he's such a threat, I think his just sheer presence on the pitch also creates space for players like Dan Crowley to thrive within. And without him there, I think it makes it much easier to defend against. I think McGoldrick was out for this one as well, so missing 2. very important players. So I don't think we can. I mean, albeit they're gonna have to find a way around this. I think Vale found it much easier to defend against Notts County for that reason. But just on Tolai, I mean, he's an interesting profile. He's someone who came through at Brighton, which I would say is always a pretty good sign. I think a Brighton sign, he was a 17-year-old from Switzerland. You're probably pretty good. A couple of pretty bad loan spells followed from there, where we saw a spell at Cambridge where he barely got on the pitch, a spell at Salford where he spent quite a lot of time on the pitch but didn't really do anything, and at Dundee where he seemingly didn't really feature. And he went to Aldershot last season on a 1-year deal and just tore up the National League basically. And very, very quickly it emerged that he was just way too good for the level. Thankfully, Aldershot had an option that they were able to trigger before selling him to Port Vale. And to my mind, you've got a player, it reminds me a little bit, not in terms of physical profile, but what he does of Kaladi Lolos, who was so important to Crawley last season in terms of being someone who is going to score a lot of goals, but is also going to create loads as well. Like, he's someone who's not just a pure goal-scoring number 10. He's someone who is creative on the ball, who is technically very gifted and has an eye for goal. And I think he is someone who is not for staying in League Two very long.
Crewe beat Gills 2-0. Both goals scored by their striker, Shiloh Tracy. What the hell? Shiloh Tracy's not a striker. He had to be here.
Great strike, the second one as well.
Oh, more of that, please, Shiloh.
Yeah.
Poachers finished for the first two. Hemmings, Bogle, Long, all out. No strikers for Lee Bell to work with. And kind of in keeping with his general management style. And I think it's a huge string to his bow. Just like really unfussy about this stuff. Never seems to moan about this stuff. Never seems to allow it to be used as an excuse for poor performances. That's partly because they rarely put in like really poor performances. He always seems to sort of find a way, match to match, to set up his team to be pretty effective. And look, Lancaster did really well for Tracy's first goal. I think it's one of those assists that doesn't look that great, and partly because of the camera angle, you can't really see exactly what he does. But I think under quite a lot of pressure, he manages to get his head up, realise that he's got one defender, OG, that he's just gone down the line to get past OG, and Amer's come across to help out OG. He realises that Tracy's just all on his own, and he manages to poke the ball to him for the finish. As you say, the second goal was just Tracy laser from the edge of the box, in off the far post, bottom corner. Brilliant finishing. And Crewe just getting a lot from their solid platform. It's 5 clean sheets in their 9 games this season, 7 0s and 1s, and that is kind of the way it has to be at the moment, I think. Bell hasn't been able to get a huge amount of consistency in selection at the top of the pitch and in attacking midfield areas, so they haven't been that fluent going forward. They've only scored more than 1 goal in 3 of their 9 games. So you make sure that defensively you are sound, and they are absolutely that. Underlying numbers, brilliant defensively. You know, in complete contrast to last season, for example. This is just a unit that is keeping the opposition at bay. The opposition XG per shot number of 0.06 is the best in the league. That, to me, says brilliant shape. So credit should always go to the players as well. Demetriou, who's just an absolute colossus, as we know, but also on loan from Bristol City, Knight Labelle, and then also Zach Williams and Cooney, Connolly, who started here for the first time too. Really impressive run for Crewe, who are one of the teams who've played 9 rather than 10 games, so probably actually even more of an impressive points return than their league position suggests. And for Gills, it's a funny old game, isn't it, George? For Gills, would it surprise you to hear that in this game they registered their most shots in a game this season? Losing in midweek, they had their 3rd most shots in a game this season. Didn't score in either of those games. The shots didn't go in. Defensively, would it surprise you to hear that they faced the fewest shots in the season so far midweek against Grimsby, and the 3rd fewest shots they've faced so far this season here? But the shots went in. They lost both games to 0.
Are we regressing to the mean? It's not. Yeah, it's
I think you've been being quite mean about this.
It's not a massive surprise, as your very interesting stats on percentage of shots that go in order to try and substantiate my evidently biased claims. It was always going to be unsustainable for that to continue. So, I still think Gills are a good side and they will be okay, but it's not a massive shock that suddenly they're not having quite such a hot streak in both boxes.
I was trying to work out, obviously, like, you hate Gills, you're really biased. And normally that comes from like the team that you like. And then I was like, who would you support if to hate Gillingham? Because I don't see them as having an obvious rival. And I've just Googled it, and the plot thickens because you've got Charlton, and there's a lot of like they've been doing battle for Kent football fans for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And Charlton used to send minibuses to Kent to get fans to take them to the Valley back in the glory days, which is not ideal. Millwall, apparently, there's Gillingham. I mean, it's a stretch geographically, and particularly given that Millwall have so many other teams closer to them. But apparently, the rivalry between Gillingham and Swindon Town.
Everyone just hates Swindon.
You should love Gills if this is the case. In 1979, there was a match at Priestfield where a home fan assaulted the referee. Oh. Animosity continued into the return at County Ground. Tempers flared and led to court appearances for 2 Gillingham players.
This is funny.
There you go.
I've just saw on Reddit, on the League 2 Reddit, the Gillingham rivalry is a strange one. It seems to be mainly their side. I've never met a Swindon fan that really cares about Gillingham.
Well, yeah, because they hate you.
Yes.
And then, this is getting confusing. No, I think, look, setting it all aside, Gills have 19 points after 10 games. It's an excellent points return. Their actual level is still difficult to truly know because of the quirks of their results so far. The points that they've picked up in even games, or even games where they might have been second best, and the points that they've lost recently in games where they will say we had plenty of chances and we could have easily picked up points in those games. So I think things will inevitably start to kind of normalise over the next 10 games, and then we'll see after that, whether they are still an automatic promotion contender, more of a playoff level team, or mid-table. We will see. Barrow beat Cheltenham 2-1. What happened?
Cheltenham went ahead early through Ryan, this is the greatest Bowman, with a really nicely taken finish. And having won in midweek, it would have been a big week for Cheltenham. If had a pretty poor start to life back in League 2 for them to get to go over the line here, but that wasn't to be. Aqua scored with a nicely taken header just after half time, and then pretty late in the game, Andy Dallas made the point safe, and they won it 2-1. It was a game where, like, at 0-0, very little happened before Bowman put Cheltenham ahead, and then Barrow were probably the dominant force in the game without really creating too much, as is often the case with Barrow. I like Aqua. It was a good finish from him. He's someone who I think, in a team that created a lot of chances, could score a lot of goals. Dallas is obviously someone who scored goals in a non-league level before, but yet to really do it here. I still worry about Cheltenham. I still think they basically create so few opportunities in games unless they're against the poorest teams in the league. But that, I think, is one thing that they can take some heart from, is if you look at their fixtures so far this season, it's been pretty difficult. Like they've already played Walsall in second, Barrow in third, Fleetwood in sixth, Wimbledon in 10th, Chesterfield in 9th. Like they've barely played any team towards the bottom end apart from Harrogate, who they beat 1-0, Accrington, who they beat 2-1, and Salford away, who they lost 2-1 to. But maybe recent evidence suggests that Salford aren't going to be down there for too long. So maybe we can, and of those teams they played towards the top end of the table, they've lost marginally, apart from Fleetwood, who they've beaten 2-0. So whilst I think there are concerns about Cheltenham, maybe there is reason to believe that when they play against, when the fixture computer throws them some nicer fixtures, they might do okay in them. Barrow continue to look very, very solid indeed.
Carl Robinson and Johnny Jackson went head-to-head, Salford against Wimbledon, having very much worked together at Charlton here. And Robinson got the upper hand with a 1-0 win. Big win, you have to say, for Salford. They hadn't won in 3 previously, and the winning goal was brilliant. It was excellent hold-up play from Kouassi. It was nice ball carrying from Kelly Namai, and it was a lovely finish from Junior Luamba. It was a pretty tight game. Wimbledon will be frustrated on a couple of levels here. There was a Bugil header that was fumbled by the goalkeeper. Dons fans would like to proffer the theory that the ball probably went over the line. They certainly look. It's one of those camera angles that look. You can make the argument for it without ever truly being able to know. As we know, the physics of whether the whole ball is over the line is incredibly difficult to judge from pretty much any angle. Even the fan filmed angle that I've seen on Twitter, I don't think you can really tell, but that sometimes gets given. Also frustrated because there was a really bad tackle from Kelly Namai, who's a player that I like a lot, like watching him a lot. He left one on Lewis when he cleared one down the line, and Lewis has picked up what looks like a really bad injury. He's been so good for Wimbledon defensively and as a leader, that if he's out for a long period of time, that would be a real disaster for them. They also now have 3 games to make up over half the league because of the games that were postponed due to the flooding, due to the fact they had to play their Carabao Cup game the following week. So 2 or 3 games to make up over the rest of the league, plus without a key player in Lewis. There's just quite a few obstacles have been put in Wimbledon's way in the last few weeks after such a good start to the season. They went about as close as you can get to scoring without actually scoring near the end. But Salford with the win, and George, 2 teams winless in League Two went head-to-head, a game that really mattered quite a lot on a few different levels. Accrington beating Morecambe 2-1.
Yes, a significant win this for Accrington, and did it in pretty good style, I would say, as well. I mean, this is obviously a game between 2 sides who, are currently seen to be the 2 poorest teams in the EFL, who are currently the 2 favourites for relegation as well. And we probably thought we'd learn a fair bit about both of them. And on the evidence of this, Accrington are comfortably the better side. Dara Costello, the hero, scoring a penalty 36 minutes into the game, and then scoring a second just before half-time, which was a fair reflection of how the game had gone up to then. Fairly nervy late on with Tollett having got one back from Morecambe. I think if you're a Morecambe fan who's kind of held on to the hope that you haven't been blitzed in many games this season, that the fixture list has been difficult, this was probably the game you go into. I mean, they were unbeaten in I think it was 4 before this game, albeit all 4 of those were draws. But this had to be a game where you showed, that you weren't a team destined for relegation, a team that had struggled so much, but they weren't able to do that. For Accrington, interestingly, their underlying numbers are kind of okay, especially from a defensive standpoint. So maybe this will be the beginning of something a bit better. And then Costello, who first came into our consciousness when he started in Vincent Kompany's first game in charge of Burnley in the Championship.
It was a big night for Vincent Kompany and Dara Costello. Yeah. And they're now in very different places.
Isn't that incredible?
Bayern München, Accrington Stanley.
Yeah. But who had a better weekend?
Well,
Bayern famously didn't win.
Love it.
Despite, I think, yeah. Anyway, that's for another podcast. An important win for Accrington. Worries for Morecambe, who, I think are probably, if you're going to list the losers of the weekend, will probably feel they're pretty up there.
Loads of draws. Chesterfield 2, Walsall 2. Kind of weird, entertaining fare here. Back passes front and centre the first half. An Oldacre back pass straight to a Walsall attacker, led to Walsall's first goal through Lowe. And then a back pass at the other end that was picked up by the goalkeeper led to an indirect free kick inside the box, which Oldacre then put in the goal. Lowe scored again in the second half, as did Dylan Markanday for Chesterfield for a 2-2 draw. Lowe and Markanday, you'd say, 2 of League Two's best loanees of the season so far. Scott Lindsay's first home game ended all square. MK Dons 1-0 up through a nice goal from White, and you'd have thought might coast to victory here, but Tranmere, nice little diagonal ball, big leap from Cameron Norman, knock it down, and Regan Hendry, who I didn't think he'd ever scored with his right foot, actually fired home a lovely finish with that, his weaker foot. And Swindon 0, Harrogate 0, Fleetwood 0, Bromley 0, Colchester 0, Carlisle 0, with 3 matches that happened in League 2.
Fleetwood Bromley really happened.
Lot of shots.
Yeah.
Shots.
Yeah. But none of them went in.
No, thank you.